I'm going to show you now another way of exporting some of your final video. Now this is more apparent from when you have a much longer video. So I thought it'd be nice to open up the original Master Sun edit that we did for Magnates Media, and one, show you the timeline of how an end project to that scale ends up looking, and how we got it out of the computer in the easiest manner, in case there were any final changes and stuff that needed to be done on the final render. Instead of rendering it every single time, start to end, every single individual clip, we've basically stitched it together sort of chapter by chapter, so that if there is a mistake or something wrong in a certain part, we only have to redo that little bit and stitch it back in, rather than every single time rendering the whole video start to finish, which is very, very heavy on your computer. So we're going to dive into the project in Premiere. There's a lot more to look at than the original project that we've just been working on in this 1 minute, but don't let that daunt you. As I said, all these steps that we've done the whole way through, they're just expanded up to eventually look like this. Okay, so this is the final project of the Master Sun long form video. This came in at 23 minutes 15, about that. So you can see there's a lot going on. So we've got our individual stitches here of sort of chapters. You can see part 2 is there, part 3, part 1, more of part 2. So it's been rendered out in different stages to sort of stitch in together. And then our sound effects and our audio and our music has just been placed along the bottom. So these here are actually rendered out videos of final pieces. This is the intro that we've already pre-rendered and stuck back in. So if I was to play this out, this is going to play now really smoothly because it's already been rendered out of the computer and been stitched back in.
Supposed to be a fund of $100 billion? Yes. Now that would be the biggest fund ever raised.
So it plays nice and smoothly. There's lots of effects in here, loads of animations, but it plays very, very smoothly because it's already rendered into out. So you can see the whole sort of piece there, and stitching into the next section here. If I was to open up an individual section of what that would look like, so this is the inside of that intro. It's in its own sequence. It's been built start to finish so that we can render that out in one go. And I'll show you the others. So we've got this other stitches here. So we've got part 2, for example. Here's part 2 in its entirety. So as you can see, we're making individual sequences for the parts, rendering them out and stitching them all together into this final piece here. So to do that, the best way is we'll just grab the intro for now. Make sure there's nothing else on our timeline. Okay, so we've got this individual section that we want to render into out. So we're going to go sequence settings. We're going to make sure our sequence here is correct, and we're going to go down to video previews. Now in video previews, we're going to select iframe only MPEG, and we're going to change that to QuickTime. So, and then we're going to change QuickTime to Apple ProRes 422 proxy. These are the easiest settings and the quickest settings that we found over a lot of testing to not lose any quality. ProRes 422 is very high codec, and the fact that it's a proxy doesn't really matter in this case because we've seen no resolution difference, especially for uploading to YouTube. And we're going to click OK on that when you're ready. And it will change, you'll get this warning saying it will change the saved formats. And essentially what that means is anything that is red on this bar needs rendering into out in order to watch smoothly. Anything that's yellow is not very CPU intensive at all. It should play okay. And anything that's green should play perfectly because it's been rendered into out inside of your sequence. So I'm going to go ahead and click now, sequence, render into out. And what that's going to do is going to change all this red and yellow to green basically. So it's essentially going to render it inside the computer. It will save all the files, and they will be quite big files, especially with the QuickTime proxy one. So make sure you've got enough storage space. If it ever cuts out and you get a warning message, it's probably because you've run out of storage on that space. So make sure you've got enough space on that drive to render the into out. So we're going to go ahead and render into out, and that is going to bring up this box here, and it's just going to start going through and changing all of this yellow to green. You can see it's starting to go now. The yellow bits will go quite quickly. The red bits will take a lot longer. So in the meantime, we just sit and wait for this to finish its job. And once it gets to the end, I'll show you how to render out that specific part of the video. Okay, so that is now green the whole way through. If I was to play it, it's going to play nice and smoothly because it's already been rendered inside Premiere.
Supposed to be a fund of $100 billion? Yes. Now that would be the biggest fund ever raised. So when you told people you were going to raise a $100 billion fund, did they tell you you were a little crazy?
Some people said.
Perfectly, and then that plays great. However, that's still inside of Premiere now. So that's rendered into out inside of Premiere. And if I was to make any changes in this video, you would see that it's going to go from green back to a different color. So if I was to bring that like this, that's going to change now. So it's now gone red because that means that section is no longer rendered into out. So this should render very quickly with the settings that we're going to create here. So we're going to call this intro stitch. Now we need to change the format in which we're rendering because the QuickTime proxy that we've done inside the sequence, we need to make sure we're set into the same one here. So we're going to go to QuickTime, select QuickTime, and we're going to make a new custom in a minute. And we're going to go change this video codec. Now this is important. It needs to match the same one as your sequence. So we're making this exactly the same format, QuickTime, and we're making the Apple ProRes 422 proxy. So that matches our sequence settings that's already rendered into out. Perfect, this is all fine. You can leave all of that and you don't need to touch any of the others. And then there's one more thing we need to do, which is very important. We're going to go down to General and we're going to use Previews. We're going to tick this box of use previews. Now essentially what that's going to do is that's going to allow us to use the previews that are already rendered into out inside of Premiere. So everything that's green is going to take those previews that it's already created files for and render them out. This intro section is about 1:35 long, lots and lots of animations. So normally that would take 20-30 minutes maybe to render out. Watch how quick we can render this out. So we're going to save this quickly as a sequence, save preset for yourself for next time. So QuickTime render, we'll call it. So that's when you want to render something that's already been rendered into out inside of Premiere, and you're just going to do a quick render on it. We can't do this inside of Media Encoder because it won't use the previews. So we're just going to click export and see how quickly this now renders out. Perfect, there we go. And that is now rendered. That's how quick that can render out of the computer. Whereas we'd normally be waiting sort of 30-40 minutes before we can move that in. It's already rendered. So let's go to where that came in. So here we go. Here's our intro. And that is essentially what we had already created in the past here. So if I was to now bring that in, here is our final that will play nice and easy.
He's also responsible for the single greatest investment.
Stitched together clip of the whole intro. And all we've done over here is we've unlinked the audio, moved it into place and lined it up with the original audio from the sequences. So we've done that with every single one, and that has allowed us to essentially end up with something that looks a little bit like this on the left. And then we've gone through, made sure that the gaps fit nicely.
Luckiest guy on the planet.
So we might add like a crossfade between still, or like a fade to make sure they're running nice and smooth. But that is essentially now a finished video that can have any final adjustments made to it. So you can see on the left hand side we've done all the sound effects here because they're not very CPU intensive, and if we want to make any final changes to the sound effects here, we can quickly come in and do that. So we could come in and I don't know, turn all of these off if, for example, we didn't want them, and that's nice and quick. And then we can also make final changes like we've done here. So for example, there's been a final issue here in the video that's needed replacing, and added the final effect on top so that now it plays fine again. So you can see how that is a really quick way and a non-destructive way of having a final render that's really safe to get out of the computer and save you a lot of time. And then from there, as normal, what is the beauty of this now is the final render on this is not going to take very long at all. And we do that now the normal way. But because these are already rendered into out, for the most part, it's going to be very quick. Obviously, in a few places where we've added some final changes, it will need a little bit of extra help coming out of the computer, but for the most part this will be a really quick render. And let's just show you a quick example of how we do that. We would go back to our normal presets that we've already created, and we would export it high resolution VBR pass 10, and that's just going to then export our whole video, and we can do that now in Encoder. So that's like a good little tool and tactic to learn how to render things into out inside of Premiere, which will save you time on the final render and stitching together little chapters. As I said, on the 1 minute video, it's not very crucial. You can just export that as it is. It's quite easy to make changes to a 1 minute video, but this is 23 minutes. So if we every time were to have a final sequence that looked like this with bits and pieces everywhere, all of these stitched together, you can imagine how hard that's going to be to make little tiny changes and every single time re-exporting the video. See you in the next video.